And PLT, OTC, turn on debris camera at T-minus 10 seconds.
T-minus 1 minute, 50 seconds and counting. Liquid hydrogen replenish of the external tank has started and pressurization to flight level is underway.
We are ready to fly. Copy that.
Command.
We'll go on the debris camera. Copy that.
Commander Dave Walker saying they're ready to fly. T-minus 1 minute, 30 seconds and counting. At the T-minus 1 minute point, the ground launch sequencer will verify that the shuttle main engines are ready to start. T-minus 1 minute, 20 seconds and counting. The liquid hydrogen tank now at flight pressure. Coming up on the 1 minute point in our countdown. T-minus 1 minute and counting. The sound suppression water system is now armed. Pre-liftoff water will be released at T-minus 16 seconds. T-minus 50 seconds and counting. The hydrogen burn igniters have been armed. They'll burn off any residual hydrogen gas under the main engines. T-minus 40 seconds and counting. The external tank heaters on the ET to orbiter structural attachments have been turned off. Orbiter computers have, and we have gone for auto-sequence start. T-minus 26 seconds, 25. T-minus 21 seconds, the SRB nozzle gimbal profile underway. T-minus 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10. We have a go for main engine start. 7, 6. We have main engine start. 2, 1, 0, and liftoff. A new era for planetary science begins as Atlantis clears the tower.
Atlantis, roll program.
Roger, roll, Atlantis.
This is Mission Control. Good roll program confirmed. Standing by for engines to throttle down. All three engines will be throttled back to 65% performance as the vehicle passes through the area of maximum dynamic pressure. Three engines now at 55%. Velocity now 1,000 feet per second. Atlantis 2 miles downrange. Now throttling back up to 104% performance. Atlantis velocity now 1,500 feet per second.
Go and throttle up.
Atlantis, roger, go.
Standing by for separation from the SRBs. Velocity now 2,000 feet per second. Altitude 10 nautical miles. Downrange distance 8 nautical miles.
External solid rocket tanks dropping away.
This is Mission Control. All APUs looking good. Three engines at 104%.
That'll happen in about 12 seconds. Solid rocket booster separation. Space shuttle now continuing to head towards space
SRB,
on liquid fuel.
Velocity 4,300 feet per second. Atlantis downrange 35 nautical miles at an altitude of 30 nautical miles.
The voice is the Mission
Three
Control.
engines all looking good at 104%.
Billy Deason, first female ascent communicator. And you probably heard at about the 1 minute and 6 second mark, the command was given, go at throttle up.
Performance nominal.
This is Mission Control.
Which nobody will hear it anymore without thinking of the Space Shuttle Challenger and its brave crew, which at that command, the Space Shuttle disintegrated. But this one, Space Shuttle Atlantis, is on its way. Everything looking good. 5 brave astronauts riding the fire, hoping to
Atlantis, 2-engine Ben Guerrier.
launch the Magellan spacecraft.
We have made it.
This is a replay of the launch. Here we go to Venus.
1, 0, and liftoff. Planetary science begins as Atlantis clears the tower.
Houston, Atlantis, roll problems.
Roger, roll, Atlantis.
The familiar roll. The spacecraft is rolled over, in effect, on its back to help it aerodynamically. A familiar sight with the shuttle liftoffs these days. And when we say, and say correctly, here we go to Venus, what we mean, of course, is once Space Shuttle Atlantis gets into its set orbit, they're going to launch that marvelously complicated and wonderful instrument, the Magellan, tiny spacecraft which will be headed for a long voyage to explore the molten hot planet of Venus. And this is replay again from a different camera.
1, 0, and liftoff. Planetary science begins as Atlantis clears the tower.
Houston, Atlantis, roll problems.
Roger, roll, Atlantis.
And perhaps an even more exciting liftoff sight and sound today than we've been accustomed to in the last several space shuttle launches because of the historic significance of this one, with the hopes of getting that Magellan spacecraft headed toward Venus once Atlantis gets up and gets into orbit. You can see now we try to give you the figures, the statistics. Downrange 213, 14 miles, altitude 67.1 miles up, and the speed, well over 7,000 miles per hour. That's 7,000 miles per hour. And we're 5 minutes into the mission. With me here at our CBS News headquarters in New York, Michael Collins, former astronaut.
2,
Michael, here is yet another replay
0,
of Atlantis going up. No matter how many times you've seen it, always gives you a little twinge and tinkle on the back of your neck.
Cliffhanger with only 5 minutes left in the launch window, Dan. I bet they were really getting a little anxious inside.
Well, it's hard not to just watch and listen, even though we're into our third replay of it. The tremendous power that it takes to get this spacecraft up into orbit. No matter how many times we explain it, we always like to review very quickly that the solid rocket boosters, long pencil-like boosters on each side, help provide the thrust to get the big space shuttle up. Then they drop away. You saw that a while back. And now the space shuttle, attached to its liquid fuel tank, makes its way up to its orbit position, and then the big liquid fuel tank will drop away, and Atlantis will be left with its maneuvering engines, which are in the tail of the spacecraft.
Roger, single engine, Van Jewel 104.
Michael Collins, at this point, we're into 6 minutes and 20 seconds into the launch. The astronauts, by this time, they cannot rest easy. They cannot be fully confident and secure, but they're beginning to feel pretty good that they're going to make it up into orbit and their mission will be successful.
Well, I think they're always concerned as long as those big motors are churning away. They'll feel a lot better about 10 minutes after launch when suddenly they find themselves floating weightless in their straps.
88 nautical miles, altitude 57 nautical miles.
Let's talk a bit about the mission, Michael Collins. We've said, well, here we go to Venus. We do not literally mean that the astronauts are going to Venus. They're going to go up there into orbit, and then they're going to launch the robot spacecraft. I don't like the word robot myself, but nonetheless, there it is, the spacecraft, the Magellan, which will come out of the back, what we might call the trunk, the cargo space of the shuttle, and it'll be headed toward Venus on a long voyage. To what purpose? Okay, we're going to Venus, that's terrific, but why? What do we hope to accomplish from this?
Well, scientists would like to understand, Dan, a little more about how planets work. And, of course, the planet we're worried about is planet Earth. But having a second planet like Venus to compare with Earth is an extremely helpful and powerful tool in that process. For example, Venus used to have water on it, no longer. What happened to the water? Why did it disappear? What does that mean for the oceans of our own planet?
Very good point. As we watch the launch of Space Shuttle Atlantis once again and make that familiar roll, that keeping in mind that Venus once had water on it, what happened to that water? What could that mean for our own oceans? There have been, in recent years, quite a bit of concern expressed about the possible heating up of our own planet and what that will mean for ocean evaporation. So by getting this Magellan launched toward Venus, which we hope to have done now that Atlantis is headed toward its orbit, it may begin to give us some clues as to what happened to that water.
Exactly. We worry about the greenhouse effect here on Earth. Venus has an incredibly powerful greenhouse effect, and studying one of that intensity, I think, will be a good help to us here.
Just got main engine cut off, Michael. So the main engine in the...
This is Mission Control. Main engine cutoff has been confirmed.
Well, we paused to hear NASA confirm that. Main engine cut off now. This is the external tank separation from the third shuttle flight. Close-up of it. Seeing those solid rocket boosters drop away.
Houston, we see a nominal
fall
MECO,
back into the ocean and get reused.
on time.
Well, you just heard the astronauts saying that things looking very good indeed for Atlantis as it moves toward the position in which it can begin to make its orbit. The first orbit is always considered among the more dangerous for obvious reasons, I think, because you're not quite sure that you're absolutely in the right orbit, and that's the reason you have all these places around the Earth for emergency landing sites.
Well, that's exactly right, Dan. If it should just limp across the Atlantic, it can come down in North Africa or in Spain. If it makes it beyond that, it could always come back in and land out at Southern California at Edwards Air Force Base. But of course, the likelihood is that it'll just keep going and it'll be up for the entire 4-day flight.
Well, we'll knock on this wood that they won't need to be making any emergency landings anywhere, that they can get the mission accomplished. Reminding you, this is CBS News live coverage of both the launch of Space Shuttle Atlantis and the Oliver North verdict. The jury is in. Oliver North convicted on 3 criminal counts, found not guilty on 9. We'll be going back to that story very shortly, but first let's go to David Dow at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California. David, quickly, because we want to get back to the North verdict. We had to cut you off when the verdict became known in your excellent report about Venus. When, David, do we figure to know for certain that they're going to be able to get the Magellan spacecraft launched toward Venus?
Well, they will commence the steps leading to the launch of Magellan about 6 hours into the mission. It will be lifted up on a sort of tilt table apparatus, cut adrift, much as we've seen other large satellites launched in the past. And then a 2-stage booster rocket will fire it off toward the planet. Of course, it'll take 15 months to get there and to begin transmitting data back. Eventually, of course, it's supposed to map the entire planet and